He called her worthless. He paraded his mistress in front of the world while treating his loyal wife like a servant. Alexander Sterling thought he was the king of New York's business world, and that his quiet, obedient wife, Isabella, was nothing more than a mistake he couldn't wait to erase. But he forgot one thing. Silence doesn't always mean weakness. Sometimes it means you're waiting for your army. Today, you're going to hear the true story of how a man who had everything lost it all in a single heartbeat, the moment he realized the woman he was divorcing wasn't a nobody. She was a princess. The invitation on the heavy cardstock shimmered under the recessed lighting of the penthouse suite. The 50th anniversary gala of Sterling Enterprises. It was the event of the year in Manhattan, a night where fortunes were made, alliances were forged, and social standings were cemented in stone. For Isabella Sterling, it felt like a summons to an execution. Isabella stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in the master bedroom, her fingers trembling as she smoothed the fabric of her dress. It was a simple navy gown, elegant but understated, off the rack from a department store, not the custom couture the other wives would be wearing. Alexander had cut her credit limits again last week. "Make sure you don't embarrass me tonight," Alexander's voice cut through the air, cold and sharp as a scalpel. Isabella turned. Alexander Sterling stood in the doorway, adjusting the onyx cufflinks on his bespoke tuxedo. He was undeniably handsome, with the kind of sharp jawline and piercing blue eyes that graced the covers of Forbes and GQ. But to Isabella, those eyes were no longer windows to a soul she loved. They were prison bars. "I won't, Alexander," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I wanted to ask if we could drive together. It's been months since—" "I'm riding with Sophia," he interrupted, not even looking at her as he checked his reflection. "She's the VP of Public Relations. We have business to discuss before the gala. You can take the town car and try to fix your hair. You look like a librarian, not the wife of a CEO. The mention of Sophia hit her like a physical blow. Sophia Laurent, his VP of Public Relations, his mistress, the woman who had slowly, methodically erased Isabella from Alexander's life, not by force, but by whispering poison in his ear until he viewed his own wife as a burden. "Alexander," Isabella said, a rare spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "It's your company's anniversary. The press will be there. It looks wrong if the CEO arrives with his assistant instead of his wife." Alexander crossed the room in 2 long strides, towering over her. The smell of his expensive cologne, sandalwood and arrogance, filled her senses. He gripped her chin, forcing her to look up at him. "Let's get one thing clear, Isabella. You are my wife on paper. Sophia is the one who helps me build this empire. You just exist in it. Don't make me regret letting you come at all." He released her with a shove and stormed out. A moment later, Isabella heard the front door slam. She stood alone in the silence of the multi-million-dollar penthouse that felt more like a mausoleum. She looked at her reflection again. He saw a librarian. He saw a nobody. But he didn't see the truth. She reached into the back of her jewelry drawer, past the modest pearls Alexander had given her 5 years ago, to a small, velvet box hidden beneath the lining. She opened it. Inside lay a ring. Not a diamond, but a heavy, intricate signet ring bearing a crest, a silver hawk clutching a rose. It was the royal seal of the House of Thorn, the ruling family of Eldoria, a small but immensely powerful European principality, known for its banking secrecy and titanium reserves. Isabella wasn't just Isabella Sterling. She was Princess Isabella Maria Thorn, the only daughter of King Edward Thorn. 5 years ago, she had run away from the suffocating protocols of the palace to find real love in America. She wanted to be loved for herself, not her title. She had hidden her identity, met Alexander when he was just a struggling entrepreneur, and used her personal inheritance, funneled through shell companies, to secretly fund his first major deal. He didn't know. He thought he was a self-made genius. He thought she was a poor orphan from Europe with no family. 5 years, she whispered to the empty room. I gave you 5 years to prove you loved me, Alexander, and you proved you love power. She snapped the box shut, but she didn't put the ring on. Not yet. Tonight was the test. Her father, King Edward, had found her 3 days ago. He was coming to the gala tonight. He had given her an ultimatum. Come home and take your place, or stay with this man who breaks you. Isabella wiped a single tear from her cheek. Tonight, she vowed. Tonight, we see who Alexander really is. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of black ties and designer silk. The air buzzed with the chatter of New York's elite. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne, and a jazz quartet played softly in the corner. Isabella arrived alone. She walked through the entrance, her head down, trying to make herself invisible. As she navigated the crowd, she heard snippets of conversation. Did you see Alexander's stock prices? Up 12%. Who is that he's with? The blonde in the red dress? That's Sophia. The wife is around here somewhere. Poor thing. Isabella stiffened. She spotted them near the center of the room. Alexander was holding court, a glass of scotch in one hand, laughing at something a senator was saying. Clinging to his arm, draped in a scandalous scarlet Versace gown that screamed for attention, was Sophia. Sophia was undeniably stunning, with cascading blonde curls and a predator's smile. She spotted Isabella before Alexander did. She nudged him, whispering something in his ear. Alexander's smile vanished. He sighed, visibly annoyed, and motioned for Isabella to come over. Like a dog being called to heel, Isabella walked toward them. The circle of elites, bankers, politicians, tech moguls, parted to let her in, their eyes filled with a mix of pity and amusement. Intertwined, Sophia cooed, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. Isabella, you made it. And look at that dress. So practical. Did you get it at Macy's? It's charming. A few people chuckled. Alexander didn't defend her. He took a sip of his drink. She has simple tastes, Sophia. Not everyone can carry off haute couture like you. Isabella felt the heat rise in her cheeks. It's blue, she said quietly. Your favorite color, Alexander. My favorite color is success, Isabella, he scoffed. Something you wouldn't understand. He turned his back on her, addressing the senator again. As I was saying, Senator, Sterling Enterprises is looking to expand into European markets next quarter. We're eyeing some partnerships in Eldoria. We hear the royal family is looking for foreign investors. Isabella froze. Eldoria. Good luck with that, the senator laughed. King Edward is notoriously private. He eats CEOs for breakfast. They say he's fiercely protective of his family, though nobody has seen his daughter in years. I can handle a king, Alexander said arrogantly. Everyone has a price. I'll buy my way in if I have to. Isabella spoke up, her voice trembling but clear. You can't buy respect, Alexander, and the king of Eldoria values loyalty above all else. The group went silent. Alexander turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. The air grew heavy. Excuse me, Alexander hissed. Since when do you have an opinion on international business strategy? Go find a waiter and get me another scotch. You're boring the guests. I'm your wife, Not your waitress, Isabella said. It was the first time in 2 years she had publicly contradicted him. Sophia laughed, a high, tinkling sound that grated on Isabella's nerves. Oh, honey, don't be dramatic. He's just stressed. Go on, be a good girl. Sophia reached out and patted Isabella's cheek condescendingly. That touch was the spark. Isabella slapped Sophia's hand away. The sound echoed through the nearby crowd. The jazz band seemed to quiet down. Heads turned. "Don't touch me," Isabella said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its tremor. The meek wife was fading. The princess was waking up. Alexander slammed his glass down on a passing waiter's tray, shattering it. Shards of glass and amber liquid spilled onto the marble floor. "That is enough!" he roared. He grabbed Isabella's arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "You ungrateful, embarrassing little... I have tolerated your mediocrity for 5 years. I gave you a roof, I gave you a name, and you repay me by causing a scene at my night." "I gave you everything!" Isabella shouted back, wrenching her arm free. "I gave you my heart. I supported you when you were nothing." "You gave me nothing but dead weight," Alexander yelled, his face red. He looked around at the hundreds of guests watching them. He needed to regain control. He needed to show he was the alpha. He sneered at her. "You want to know the truth, Isabella? I'm done. I was going to wait until after the holidays. But why wait? I want a divorce." Gasps rippled through the room. Sophia covered a smirk with her manicured hand. "I'm filing tomorrow," Alexander announced, his voice booming to the back of the room. "And don't think you're getting a dime. You signed a prenup. You leave with what you came with, which is absolutely nothing. You are a nobody, Isabella. You always were, and without me, you'll go back to being a nobody." Isabella stood there, the words washing over her. Strangely, the pain didn't break her. It crystallized her. "A nobody?" she repeated softly. "Worthless," Alexander confirmed, wrapping an arm around Sophia's waist. "Now get out of my sight before I have security throw you out." Isabella looked at him, really looked at him, and saw him for the small, greedy man he was. She reached into a clutch, but she didn't pull out a tissue. She pulled out the velvet box. "I will leave, Alexander," she said, her voice suddenly calm, regal. "But first, there is someone who would like to have a word with you about that European expansion you mentioned." "What are you babbling about?" Alexander snapped. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the main entrance of the ballroom blew open with a thunderous crash. The room fell deadly silent. Marching in were 12 men in dark suits, wearing earpieces and silver lapel pins, the Royal Guard. They moved with military precision, flanking the entrance. Then, a man stepped through. He was in his 60s, with silver hair and a beard that commanded authority. He wore a tuxedo, but across his chest was a sash of purple silk and a chest full of medals. He carried a cane topped with a gold hawk. It was King Edward Thorne of Eldoria. The senator dropped his drink. "My God," he whispered. "That's the king." Alexander's eyes went wide. He adjusted his tie, panic and excitement warring in his face. "The king? Here? Is he here for me?" He pushed Sophia aside and stepped forward, putting on his best salesman's smile. "Your Majesty," Alexander called out, striding toward the center of the room. "What an honor! I am Alexander Sterling. I assume you're here to discuss the investment deal?" King Edward didn't even look at Alexander. His steel-grey eyes scanned the room, bypassing the billionaires and the models until they locked onto the lone woman standing in the center of the circle, clutching a velvet box. The king walked right past Alexander, as if he were a ghost. Alexander froze, confused. "Your Majesty." The king stopped in front of Isabella. The room held its breath. Isabella looked at the old man, tears welling in her eyes, not of sadness but of relief. King Edward dropped his cane. It clattered loudly on the floor. He opened his arms. "It has been too long," the king's voice boomed, deep and emotional. "My daughter." The silence in the room was so profound, you could hear a heartbeat. Sophia's jaw dropped. Alexander's face went pale, the color draining away until he looked like a sheet of paper. "Daughter?" Alexander stammered, his voice cracking. Isabella stepped forward and embraced her father. When she pulled back, she opened the velvet box, took out the signet ring with the royal crest, and slid it onto her finger. She turned to face her husband, her eyes dry and cold as ice. "You called me a nobody, Alexander," Isabella said, her voice ringing with the authority of centuries of royal blood. "Allow me to reintroduce myself. I am Princess Isabella Maria Thorne of Eldoria. And you have just declared war on the crown." The silence in the Pierre Hotel ballroom was shattered by the blinding flash of 1,000 smartphone cameras. Every guest, from the senator to the waitstaff, had their phones raised, capturing the fall of Alexander Sterling live for the world to see. Alexander stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. He looked at the signet ring on Isabella's finger. The silver hawk, the symbol of absolute power he had joked about conquering just minutes ago. "Princess?" Alexander laughed nervously, a high-pitched, manic sound. He looked around the room, desperate for an ally. This is a joke, right? Isabella, honey, you hired an actor. It's a prank for the anniversary." "Very funny. You got me." He reached out to grab her shoulder, trying to force a camaraderie that didn't exist. Thwack! Before his hand could graze the silk of her dress, a heavy cane cracked against his wrist. Alexander yelped and recoiled, clutching his hand. King Edward stood between them, his face a mask of terrifying calm. "Touch her Royal Highness again," the king said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room, "and you will lose the hand." Alexander's face turned from pale to grey. The pain in his wrist told him this was no actor. This was real. The man he had planned to swindle was standing in front of him, defending the wife he had just discarded. "Your Majesty," Alexander stammered, his survival instinct kicking in. He dropped to his knees, not out of respect, but out of fear. I didn't know. Isabella never told me. She lied to me. If I had known she was royalty, if you had known," Isabella interrupted, her voice cutting through his excuses, "you would have treated me like a trophy instead of a person. You would have paraded me around like you do your cars and your mistress. I wanted to be loved for who I was, Alexander. And you showed me exactly how much Isabella the Nobody meant to you." "No, no, baby, please," Alexander begged, crawling forward slightly. "I was stressed. The business, the pressure. I didn't mean what I said about the divorce. I love you. We can fix this. Think of what we can do together. Sterling Enterprises and Eldoria. We would be unstoppable." Sophia, realizing the ship was sinking, tried to slink away into the crowd. "Going somewhere, Miss Laurent?" Isabella asked. Sophia froze. The crowd parted, leaving her isolated in her bright red dress, looking like a bloodstain on the pristine floor. Isabella walked toward her. Sophia trembled. "Isabella, look, I was just doing my job. He told me you were separated. He told me you were crazy." "And you believed him because it was convenient," Isabella said coolly. "You mocked my clothes. You mocked my intelligence. You stood there and smiled while my husband humiliated me." Isabella leaned in close, so only Sophia and Alexander could hear. You wanted to be the Queen of Sterling Enterprises? You can have it, because by tomorrow morning, this empire will be nothing but rubble. Isabella turned back to her father. I'm ready to go home, Papa. King Edward nodded. He signalled to his guards. But before they left, the king turned to Alexander, who was still kneeling on the floor, sweat pouring down his face. Mr. Sterling, the king said, you mentioned earlier that you are a self-made man, that you built this company from nothing. Alexander looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. Yes, your majesty. I am a hard worker. Lies, the king spat. Did you really think I let my only daughter disappear into America without watching her? I knew where she was every day of these last 5 years, and I know where your money came from. The king gestured to the crowd. 5 years ago, your company was bankrupt. You were about to be evicted. Then, miraculously, an anonymous angel investor from the Orion Trust injected $5 million into your startup. You thought it was luck. Alexander's eyes went wide. Orion Trust. That's my main backing. Orion, Isabella whispered. The hunter. It's the constellation directly above my bedroom in the palace. Alexander looked at his wife in horror. I gave you everything, Alexander, Isabella said, a tear finally escaping. That was my inheritance. I saved you. I bought your first office. I paid for your first production line. I made you. The crowd gasped. The narrative of the genius billionaire collapsed in seconds. He wasn't a genius. He was a husband living off his wife's secret charity, a wife he just called worthless. You own Orion, Alexander whispered. I do, Isabella said. And as of this morning, Orion Trust has pulled all funding and demanded immediate repayment of all loans due to breach of character clauses. You can't do that, Alexander screamed, scrambling to his feet. That will bankrupt me. That's all my liquid capital. Then I suggest you start selling your suits, Isabella said, turning her back on him. Come, father. The royal guards formed a wedge. Isabella and King Edward walked out of the ballroom with their heads held high. The heavy doors swung shut behind them, leaving Alexander Sterling standing amidst the shattered glass of his scotch, the flash of cameras, and the mocking whispers of the elite who used to worship him. He looked at Sophia. She looked at him with pure disgust. You broke, she spat. You're actually broke? Sophia, wait. Don't touch me, she shrieked, echoing Isabella's words from earlier. I'm not going down with you. As Sophia ran for the exit and the senator laughed in his face, Alexander Sterling realized the true cost of the divorce he had asked for. The sun rose over Manhattan, but for Alexander Sterling, it felt like the onset of a long, dark winter. He hadn't slept. He had spent the night in his office at the Sterling Tower, frantically calling board members, investors, and lawyers. No one was picking up. His phone buzzed. It was a notification from Twitter. The Silent Princess was trending #1 worldwide. The Sterling fraud was #2. He opened the app with trembling fingers. The video of the gala had 50 million views in 6 hours. Comments were pouring in by the thousands. Imagine fumbling a literal princess for a side chick. LMAO. He called her worthless, and she literally paid for his shoes. The audacity of men. I hope she takes the shirt off his back. Team Isabella. Alexander threw his phone against the wall. It cracked, the screen spider-webbing, much like his life. It's fixable, he muttered to himself, pacing the office. It's just a PR nightmare. I can spin this. I'll go on TV. I'll apologize. I'll say I was drunk. I'll say I was intimidated by her royal status and acted out of insecurity. People love a redemption arc. He pressed the intercom button on his desk. Linda, get me a press conference, noon, and get Sophia in here. We need to present a united front, or— Mr. Sterling? Linda's voice crackled through the speaker. She sounded distant, cold. Sophia resigned via email at 3:00 a.m. She's already given an exclusive interview to TMZ, claiming she was a victim of your manipulation. Alexander slumped into his leather chair. Of course she did. Also, sir, Linda continued, the board of directors is here. They're in conference room B. They want to see you. Now. Alexander straightened his tie, though his hands were shaking. Fine. I'll handle them. He walked out of his office and down the long glass corridor. Usually, employees would greet him with nods of respect. Today, the bullpen was silent. People huddled in groups, whispering. When they saw him, they quickly looked down or pretended to type. He could feel their judgment burning into his skin. He pushed open the doors to conference room B. The long mahogany table was full. 12 angry men and women, the sharks who helped him run his empire, were waiting. At the head of the table sat Marcus Thorne, no relation to the king, purely a coincidence of name that Alexander now found ironic, the chairman of the board. Sit down, Alexander, Marcus said. He didn't offer a handshake. Marcus, Alexander said, trying to summon his CEO bravado. I know last night looked bad, but it's a personal matter. It doesn't affect the company's ability to— It affects everything. Marcus slammed a file onto the table. Our stock dropped 40% when the markets opened in London. Eldoria has placed an embargo on any company associated with you. Do you know what that means? We just lost our titanium supplier. Our manufacturing has halted. I can fix it, Alexander insisted. I'll talk to Isabella. She loves me. She's just emotional right now. The door to the conference room opened again. I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mr. Sterling. A woman stepped in. She was sharp, terrifyingly poised, wearing a suit that cost more than Alexander's car. She carried a leather briefcase. Who are you? Alexander demanded. I am Dame Evelyn Cross, the woman said, her British accent clipping the air. Royal attorney for the House of Thorne, and I am here to serve you. She slid a thick stack of documents across the table. What is this? A restraining order for starters, Evelyn said calmly. You are to come nowhere near Her Royal Highness. Secondly, this is a notice of asset seizure. Alexander laughed incredulously. Seizure? You can't just seize my company. Not your company, Mr. Sterling. Her company. Evelyn opened a folder. As the Orion Trust has invoked the character clause in your initial lending agreement, a clause you signed without reading 5 years ago because you were too arrogant to hire a proper lawyer, ownership of Sterling Enterprises reverts to the primary investor in the event of gross public misconduct causing reputational damage. The room went dead silent. The board members looked at the documents. Marcus flipped through a few pages, his eyes widening. It's ironclad, Marcus whispered. She owns it. She owns 51% of the controlling stake through the debt conversion. This is insane, Alexander screamed. I built this. With her money, Evelyn corrected. And now she is taking it back. Evelyn turned to the board. Gentlemen, Her Royal Highness proposes a vote of no confidence in the current CEO. If you vote to remove Mr. Sterling effective immediately, the Royal House of Thorne will stabilize the stock, reinstate the supply chain, and double your annual bonuses. The board members exchanged glances. It took less than 3 seconds. All in favor? Marcus asked. 12 hands shot up into the air. Motion carried, Marcus said, not even looking at Alexander. Alexander, you're fired. Security will escort you out. You can't do this to me, Alexander roared, lunging toward the table. 2 security guards, men Alexander had hired himself, stepped forward and grabbed his arms. Get your hands off me! Alexander thrashed as they dragged him toward the door. "I am Alexander Sterling. I am the King of New York." "Not anymore," Evelyn said, snapping her briefcase shut. "Now, you are just the ex-husband." They dragged him out of the conference room, past the glass walls where his employees watched. He wasn't walking out with dignity like Isabella had. He was being hauled out like trash. They shoved him into the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. As the doors closed, Alexander saw the TV screen in the reception area. It was a live news feed. Breaking news. Princess Isabella of Eldoria to host press conference regarding the future of Sterling Enterprises. Rumors of a massive charitable donation to domestic abuse survivors. The elevator descended, taking Alexander down to the ground floor, down to where the regular people were. He had nothing. No wife, no mistress, no company, no money. But the worst was yet to come. Because the royal family of Eldoria didn't just believe in justice, they believed in punishment. The sidewalk outside the Sterling Tower was cold, a sharp contrast to the climate-controlled executive suite Alexander had occupied for the last 5 years. He stood there, holding a cardboard box containing a few personal photos and a stapler, the only things security had allowed him to take. He hailed a taxi. He needed to get home, regroup, and call his personal lawyer. He reached into his pocket and found a crumpled $20 bill. That would get him to the Upper East Side. "The Kensington Towers," Alexander barked at the driver. "And make it quick." The taxi driver glared at him in the rearview mirror. "Hey, aren't you that guy? The worthless wife guy from the video?" Alexander grit his teeth. "Just drive." When the taxi pulled up to the gilded awning of the Kensington Towers, Alexander threw the 20 at the driver and stormed toward the glass doors. He saw Jerry, the doorman who had worked there for 10 years. Jerry had always been obsequious, opening doors with a smile, grateful for Alexander's sparse holiday tips. Alexander reached for the door handle, but it didn't move. It was locked. He knocked on the glass. "Jerry, open the damn door. My keycard isn't working." Jerry stood on the other side of the glass. He crossed his arms. He didn't smile. "Jerry!" Alexander shouted, rattling the handle. "It's Mr. Sterling. Open up!" Jerry walked slowly to the door, cracked it open 2 inches, and spoke through the gap. "Mr. Sterling, management has instructed me not to let you in." "What?" Alexander laughed, a desperate, barking sound. "I own the penthouse. I bought it." "Actually, sir," Jerry said, his voice dripping with a newfound lack of respect, "the deed to the penthouse is held by the Orion Trust. We received a call from a Dame Evelyn Cross about an hour ago. The locks have been changed. Your personal belongings are being packed and will be sent to a storage facility in Queens. You have no access rights." "You can't do this!" Alexander slammed his shoulder against the door. "My clothes are in there. My watch collection. My safe." "Not anymore," Jerry said. "And, sir? You might want to move. You're blocking the entrance for the residents." Jerry closed the door and locked it. Alexander watched as Jerry turned his back on him. "I'll sue you," Alexander screamed at the glass. "I'll sue all of you." Passers-by were stopping. Phones were out. Click, click, click. The flashing lights were like strobe lights in a nightmare. Alexander turned and ran. He ran until his lungs burned, ducking into a Starbucks 3 blocks away to hide. He needed to think. He needed money. He pulled out his wallet. The black Amex, the platinum Visa, the corporate card. He walked up to the counter. Double espresso, black. He tapped the Amex. Beep. Declined. The barista looked at him. "Try another one." He tapped the Visa. Beep. Declined. Sweat pricked at his hairline. "It's a bank error. Try this one." He handed over the debit card, linked to his private offshore account, the rainy day fund he had hidden from everyone, even Isabella. Or so he thought. Beep. Card seized. Contact issuer. Alexander stared at the little screen. Seized? Sir, there's a line, the barista said, annoyed. If you can't pay, you have to leave. Alexander looked at the coffee he couldn't afford. He looked at the people in the line, people he used to view as ants. Now they were patrons, and he was a beggar. He stumbled out of the shop, his stomach twisting with hunger and panic. He sat on a park bench, his expensive Italian suit now wrinkled and stained with sweat. He had nothing. No home, no car, no money, no friends. He pulled out his cracked phone. He had one option left. He had to talk to Isabella. He had to convince her that this punishment was too severe. He had to play the victim. He checked the newsfeed again. Princess Isabella and King Edward to depart from Teterboro Airport at 6 p.m. tonight. It was 4:30 p.m. He had to get to New Jersey. He had no money for a cab. He looked at his wrist, his watch, a Patek Philippe, worth $80,000. He had been wearing it when he was fired. He ran to a pawn shop on 8th Avenue. The broker, a greasy man behind bulletproof glass, looked at the watch, then at Alexander. $500, the man said. It's worth 80,000, Alexander shouted. It was worth 80,000. But I saw the news, buddy. This is stolen property, pending a royal lawsuit. I take this. I'm taking a risk. 500. Take it or leave it. Alexander felt tears prick his eyes. He slammed the watch on the counter. Give me the cash. With $500 in his pocket, Alexander Sterling hailed a cab and gave the driver the address for Teterboro Airport. He wasn't going to let her leave, not until he got what he deserved. The private terminal at Teterboro was swarming with police and private security. A massive Boeing 747, painted with the royal crest of Eldoria, the hawk and rose, sat on the tarmac, its engines humming. Alexander arrived just as a convoy of black SUVs pulled up to the gate. He jumped out of the taxi before it even fully stopped. "Isabella!" he screamed, sprinting toward the fence. "Isabella!" 2 police officers tackled him instantly. His face was pressed into the chain-link fence, the metal digging into his cheek. "Let me go! That's my wife!" Alexander yelled, spitting gravel. "I have a right to speak to her." Inside the perimeter, the door of the lead SUV opened. King Edward stepped out, looking regal even in a travel coat. Then Isabella emerged. She had changed out of her gala gown into a cream-colored cashmere coat and sunglasses. She looked like a movie star. She looked unreachable. She paused. She heard the screaming. She looked toward the fence, where Alexander was thrashing against the cops. She said something to her father. The king frowned, shook his head, but eventually nodded. The king signaled the officers. They hauled Alexander to his feet, but kept his arms pinned behind his back. Isabella walked toward the fence, stopping 5 feet away. She didn't look angry anymore. She looked tired. "Isabella," Alexander panted, his suit torn, his hair wild. "Isabella, tell them to let me go. This has gone too far. You took my company. You took my home. You took my watch." "I took back what was mine," Isabella said calmly. "You have your freedom, Alexander. You're not in jail. Yet." "I have nothing," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "How am I supposed to live? You can't leave me like this. We were married for 5 years. Doesn't that mean anything?" "It meant everything to me," Isabella replied. "That's why I hid who I was. I wanted to be sure you weren't like the others, men who only wanted the title, the money. I gave you 5 years to prove you were a good man, and you spent 5 years proving you were a narcissist." "I can change," Alexander begged. "I learned my lesson, I swear. Just give me a chance. Don't get on that plane. Stay here. We can talk. We can start over." Isabella shook her head slowly. She reached into her oversized handbag. Alexander's heart leaped. Was she going to give him money? A check? A key to an apartment? She pulled out a crumpled white envelope. It was the same envelope she had tried to give him in the limousine the night before. The one he had swatted away so he could call Sophia. She passed it through the chain-link fence. "You asked if our marriage meant anything," Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. "I was going to give you this last night, before the gala. I was going to tell you that despite everything, despite the coldness, the late nights, the rumors about Sophia, I still had hope." Alexander took the envelope with shaking hands. He tore it open. It wasn't a check. It wasn't a legal document. It was a glossy black and white photograph. A medical sonogram. Alexander stared at the grainy image, a tiny bean-shaped form curled in the center. Patient. Isabella Sterling. Date. Dector 14th. Gestational age. 12 weeks. The world stopped spinning. The noise of the jet engines faded into a dull roar. "You!" Alexander looked up, his eyes wide with shock. "You're pregnant," Isabella whispered. 12 weeks. It's a boy." Alexander felt a punch to his gut, harder than any physical blow. A son. He had always talked about wanting a son. Someone to carry on the Sterling name. Someone to mold in his image. "A son," Alexander breathed, a smile breaking through his panic. "Isabella, we're having a son. This changes everything. You can't leave now. You can't take my son away from me." He reached through the fence, trying to grab her hand. "This is it. This is our fresh start. I'll be a great father. I promise. Let me in. Let's go home." Isabella took a step back, out of his reach. Her face hardened into stone. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice cold as the grave. "Last night, when you told me I was worthless, when you said you wanted a divorce, you weren't just discarding a wife. You were discarding the mother of your child." "I didn't know," Alexander screamed. "You didn't care to know," she shouted back, her royal composure cracking. "I tried to tell you in the car. You told me to shut up and fix my hair. You chose your mistress over your family." She took a deep breath, composing herself. "This child," she said, pointing to her stomach, "is a prince of the House of Thorn. He will be raised in Eldoria. He will be taught honor, duty, and respect. He will be a king one day." She looked Alexander dead in the eye. "And he will never, ever know your name." "You can't do that," Alexander thrashed against the copse, tears streaming down his face, mixed with snot and dirt. "I have rights. I'm the father." "You signed the divorce papers this morning," Isabella said. "Or rather, your power of attorney did when the assets were seized. And in Eldoria, royal custody is absolute. You are a stranger to this child." She turned around. "Isabella, no, please," Alexander howled. "My son! Don't take my son!" King Edward stepped forward. He looked at Alexander with a mixture of pity and revulsion. "You built a house of glass, Mr. Sterling," the king said. "Do not be surprised when it shatters." The king offered his arm to his daughter. Isabella took it. She didn't look back. They walked across the tarmac and up the stairs of the massive jet. The door closed. The engines whined to a crescendo. Alexander collapsed against the fence, sliding down until he hit the asphalt. He clutched the sonogram photo to his chest, the only thing he had left of the life he had destroyed. As the plane lifted off into the orange sunset, carrying his wife and his unborn heir away forever, Alexander Sterling let out a scream that was lost in the roar of the jet wash. He was the King of New York no more. He was just a man in a torn suit, crying in the dirt. New York City had moved on. The name Alexander Sterling was a footnote in business textbooks, a cautionary tale taught in ethics classes under the chapter Hubris. The Sterling Tower had been renamed Thorn Plaza, a beacon of charitable organizations and sustainable energy firms run by the royal house of Eldoria. For the man who once claimed to own the city, the view had changed drastically. Alexander sat in a small, cramped diner in Queens, staring at a plate of cold eggs. He wore a grey uniform with a name tag that read Alex. He worked as a night shift manager at a logistics warehouse, ironically, moving boxes for a company he used to compete with. His hair was thinning, and the sharp jawline was hidden behind a scruffy, unkempt beard. He looked older than his 40 years. The fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a dull, aching resignation. "Hey, Alex," the waitress called out, pouring him a refill of weak coffee. "You going to pay for that, or is it on the house again?" "I've got it," Alexander muttered, fishing a few crumpled bills from his pocket. He looked up at the TV mounted in the corner of the diner. It was tuned to a global news network. Live. The royal coronation of Crown Prince Isabella of Eldoria. Alexander's heart stopped. He hadn't seen her face in 5 years. On the screen, Isabella stood on a balcony overlooking a massive crowd in the capital city of Eldoria. She looked magnificent, regal, strong, and radiant. She wore a crown of diamonds and sapphires, but her smile was warmer than it had ever been when she was Mrs. Sterling. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" the waitress mused, wiping the counter. "I heard she's a single mum, raising the heir all by herself. That's a strong woman." Alexander couldn't speak. He just watched. Then the camera angle shifted. A small boy, about 4 years old, stepped out onto the balcony holding Isabella's hand. He had dark hair and piercing blue eyes. Alexander's eyes. The chyron on the screen read, Prince Leo Thorn, age 4. Alexander felt a physical pain in his chest, a hollow ache that threatened to swallow him whole. That was his son. That was Leo. A boy he had never held, never spoken to, never bought a toy for. The boy waved to the crowd, mimicking his mother's wave, with a serious, focused expression. "Look at the little guy," the waitress chuckled. "He looks just like his grandpa." "No," Alexander whispered, tears blurring his vision. "He looks like me." The door to the diner opened with a chime. A woman walked in. She looked haggard, wearing a worn-out coat and heavy makeup trying to cover deep lines of stress. She was holding a stack of flyers. "Excuse me," the woman said to the diners. "I'm looking for work, cleaning, secretarial, anything." Alexander froze. He knew that voice. It was Sophia. She looked nothing like the red dress siren from the gala. Her blonde hair was brittle, her face gaunt. The scandal had destroyed her career even more thoroughly than it had Alexander's. No reputable firm would touch the mistress who mocked a princess. Sophia moved down the line of booths. She stopped at Alexander's table. She didn't recognize him at first. "Sir, if you know of any openings," she began, then stopped. She squinted. "Alexander," she breathed. They stared at each other. Two ghosts of a former life, brought low by their own greed. "Sophia," Alexander said, his voice raspy. "You look terrible," she said, a ghost of her old sneer appearing before vanishing into misery. "So do you," he replied. "I live in a studio in the Bronx," she admitted, sitting down uninvited. "I lost everything. The modeling contracts, the apartment. Nobody invites me to parties anymore." "I saw the news," Alexander said, nodding at the TV. Sophia looked up. She saw Isabella and Prince Leo on the screen. The crowd on TV was cheering, "Long live the Queen!" Sophia let out a bitter laugh. She won. She actually won. "She didn't win," Alexander said softly, unable to take his eyes off his son. "She just didn't lose herself." "We did," He stood up, leaving his unfinished eggs. He couldn't bear to look at Sophia. She was a mirror of his own failure. "Where are you going?" Sophia asked. "To work," Alexander said. "I have boxes to move." 1 year later, a heavy package arrived at the royal palace in Eldoria. It had been screened by security 3 times, x-rayed, and sniffed by dogs before it was placed on the desk of Queen Isabella. Isabella sat in her study, the morning sun streaming through the high windows. Leo was playing with a wooden train set on the rug. "Mama, look! Fast train!" Leo giggled. "Very fast, my love." Isabella smiled. She looked at the package. The return address was a law firm in New York. Estate of Alexander Sterling. Isabella frowned. She picked up the letter attached to the package. "Your Majesty, it is with regret that we inform you of the passing of Mr. Alexander Sterling. He died last week of a heart attack in his apartment in Queens. He had no living relatives listed, and his will instructed that this package be delivered to you." Isabella felt a strange chill. He was dead. The man she had once loved, then hated, then pitied, was gone. She opened the package. Inside was a small, cheap wooden box. She opened the lid. Inside lay 2 things. First, the Patek Philippe watch. He had apparently bought it back from the pawn shop, paying it off in installments over 5 years. Second, a letter, handwriting she recognized instantly, though it was shakier than she remembered. "Isabella, if you are reading this, my time is up. I'm not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing this because I need you to know that I watched. I watched every speech you gave. I watched every charity you launched. And I watched him. I saw Leo on the news last week. He has your smile. Thank God for that. But I saw him frown when the reporter asked him a tough question, and I saw myself. It terrified me. I worked double shifts for 5 years to buy this watch back. I know it's meaningless to a queen, but it was the watch I was wearing the night I lost you. It's the only thing of value I have left. Please give it to him when he's older. Don't tell him it's from his father. Tell him it's from a man who learned too late that time is the one thing you can't buy." You were right, Isabella. I was a nobody. But you made me feel like a king for a while. I just wish I had realized that the crown wasn't the money. It was you. Goodbye, Alex. Isabella put the letter down. A single tear traced a path down her cheek. "Mama, why are you crying?" Leo asked, running over to her. He put his small hand on her knee. Isabella wiped her face and looked at her son. She looked at the watch in the box, a symbol of a man's vanity, now redeemed as a symbol of his regret. "I'm not sad, Leo," she said, picking him up and setting him on her lap. "I just received a gift." "From who?" Isabella picked up the watch. She fastened it around her own wrist. It was loose, heavy, and cold. "From someone I used to know," she said softly. "Someone who taught me a very important lesson." "What lesson?" Leo asked, his blue eyes wide. Isabella kissed his forehead. "That true power isn't about what you own, my love. It's about who you protect." She stood up, holding her son, and walked to the window. Outside, the kingdom of Eldoria stretched out, green and golden in the sunlight. She was the queen. She was a mother. And finally, she was free. And that is the tragic, redeeming end of Alexander Sterling. He spent his whole life chasing gold, only to die with nothing but a watch and a regret. It's a harsh reminder. Be careful who you step on while climbing to the ladder, because they might just be the one holding it up. What did you think of Isabella's choice at the end? Should she have let Alexander see his son before he died? Or did he get exactly what he deserved? I want to see your debates in the comments, Team Forgive or Team Justice. If this story gave you chills, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every Tuesday and Friday. Thanks for watching. And remember, real royalty isn't in your blood. It's in your behavior. It's in your behavior. It's in your behavior. It's in your behavior. It's in your behavior.
But now there's factions of people go, oh no, we got it, we don't like it, we've changed our mind, it wasn't going well for us, we don't like free speech anymore. People who want free speech, they only want free speech so they can go around saying awful things, which just isn't true. And even if it was, the good thing about free speech is people can say awful things back. It's a really good system, right? And you can't say anything under the laws of free speech. That's a total misconception. There are loads of caveats to free speech, all of which I agree with, actually. You can't incite violence. Good rule. You can't slander people. Good rule. You can't libel people, you know? Fascinating fact about libel law. You can't libel the dead. So I could stand here and say, Gandhi used to take it up the arse. If I wanted. Which I do. But free speech is the most important human right there is. It's the right from which all other rights come. Without free speech, you couldn't have human rights, you know, and we've got free speech, in theory, in this country, for a little while longer. We can criticise the government, we can criticise the police, but we should give props to a country that allows us to do that, because we're the envy of some countries. In some countries, you criticise the police, you get beaten up, or worse. You criticise the government, you can be thrown in jail for life, you know. So they flee their oppression, quite rightly. You know, so would you. They flee their oppression, and they come here, they go, we want to come to England. We go, why? They go, free speech. We go, come on in, welcome. What are you going to do now? We're going to go on a march. What are you going to say? How shit England is. Cheers. Thank you. Thank you. That is their right. Have a great show, and I left. And as I was leaving, I saw one of the other lawyers lean in and show this head lawyer his iPhone, and the head lawyer went, oh yeah. He went, oh sorry Ricky, can you come back a minute? Right, so I'm there, I went, yeah. So he had the phone there. They'd looked up the word minge. I thought I'd gotten away with it, right? So it's now like I'm getting told off. And the head lawyer said, now it says here that the word minge is a derogatory term for female genitalia. I went, well, yeah, it's a slang word for vagina in England. You don't even use it here, do you? He went, no, we don't, but we go around the world, and with due diligence, now we know it's derogatory, we'll have to bleep that word live. I went, don't bleep the word, like, because people at home won't know what I've said. It'll ruin I said, it's literally the punchline. He said, if it's derogatory, I have to... I said, well, what word could I use that you wouldn't bleep? And he went, well, you could say vagina. I went, I'm not saying vagina, right? Nothing funny about it. It's so clinical. I was thinking, Judy Dench at home going, why is he talking about my actual vagina, right? I said, minge isn't like that. It's like, it's not so specific, because vagina's so... Where's your vagina? There, right? Where's your minge? There. It's like... Then one of the younger lawyers went, what about box? I went, I'm not fucking saying box, mate, right? So imagine looking at your own box, right? I said, minge is perfect. I said, people won't know what... If they're American, they won't know it. I said, it's not offensive. It's like... I said, kids use the word in England. Right? They weren't having it. So I said, what about flange? Right? So they looked up the word flange, right? And he went, well, that'd just be confusing, because in America, a flange is a part of a sink unit. I went, oh, well, I said, please let me say minge and don't bleep it. I was really rooting for minge. Right? It was like 12 Angry Men. I go, no one's leaving till I can say minge. Right? And after about 10 minutes, I wore them down. Whatever they said, that won't work. So I was going, please. I said, I'll write them. You won't get any complaints and all this sort of... And eventually, the head lawyer went, OK, you can say minge. I went, and you won't bleep it? He went, no, we won't bleep it. I went, you promise? He went, yes. And I left. I knew they would. And they fucking did, right? So, when I said minge, I pointed. Oh, why do you like London so much, Rick? Because you get a round of applause for not shitting yourself. Right. But that's the next phase now. I reckon it's the next 10 years that I will. But as of now, my arsehole has never let me down. Very underrated, the human arsehole. Everyone goes, oh, the human brain, the greatest computer known to man. Oh, the human liver can regenerate itself. Your arsehole is working 24/7. Even when you're asleep, it's like that. You're not coming out. You're not coming out. You're not coming out. Nope. You're not coming out. And you're not coming in. Because it's like a sewer in there, isn't it? But you've got a lovely little manhole cover. Think of that in real life. Walking along a pavement, there's lovely pavement. If that burst, and you know what's in a sewer, don't you? Piss and shit and cum and dead goldfish, fetuses. In China, just the girl ones. Relax. I'm at that age now as well, because I'm in entertainment. People say, oh, you can have a facelift. I go, no. Have you seen facelifts? They're still just that. Like that. You know what I mean? You go to the doctor, and the doctor goes, do you want to look old or Chinese? You know, it's like... Nothing wrong with looking Chinese if you're Chinese. If you're not Chinese, it's a bit weird. It's offensive. Why is that allowed? You're not allowed to black up. It was considered a good thing to swap ideas with other cultures, with other nations, to share things with other races, to assimilate. It was the opposite of racist. Now it's racist. Gwen Stefani got in trouble in her last video because she had her blonde hair in dreadlocks. People go, no, black people invented dreadlocks, you can't have them, you're white, that's racist. Jamie Oliver got in trouble when he put out authentic jerk chicken recipe. People go, no, black people invented that, you can't have it, you're white, that's racist. Now, black people, they use the N-word, don't they? We invented that. That's the one, isn't it? That's the one. Listen, I know white people are the worst. I know that. That's why no one likes a fucking white middle-aged man anymore until we need a boiler fixing. Then it's get the bald bloke round now. Critical race theory, have you heard of that? Being taught in schools now, particularly in trendy areas like LA, right? Just like 5-year-old kids and 6-year-old kids. If you haven't heard it, in a nutshell, critical race theory says that all white people are racist. It says that we're born racist and we continue to be racist because we're affording the privilege of a racist society set up by our forefathers, okay? So basically, all white people are racist and there's nothing we can do about it, which is a relief.